Ew, what a stench! So ludicrous, drenched in wine. My oldest son's wife, with devilish eyes, mocks me loudly while I lie bedridden with fever. Incredibly, the she-devil had the audacity to drench me with wine while I'm sick. In my daze, her cruel actions and words pierced my heart. We're heading back to our own place soon, so make sure you clean up before we get back. Don't leave a speck of dust. Her arrogant comment made me want to suspect if she was possessed by a devil. But this attitude of hers isn't anything new. Since we started living together, she has always made me feel like an outsider, always playing mean tricks on me. Wow, that's lame, Catherine. You're so mean. Even my eldest son, joining in on his wife's behavior, claps his hands and bursts into laughter behind her. I wonder how he grew up to be like this. That's fine. I'm not bothered by this. So what about it? You'll clean up, right? Not like you have any other choice. She looks down at me with a smirk. Throughout this, she continues to haunt me with phrases like, "How filthy." Yes, I'll clean up. Unable to speak up, I reluctantly answered, biting my lips. Then I'll leave it to you. If it's not clean, I'm not responsible for what happens to this house. I understand. I was unable to talk back because of my fever, and I grudgingly replied as she wished. But my blood was boiling with anger. I was no longer able to forgive my eldest son and his wife. My name is Mary. I'm a 71-year-old homemaker. My husband, Bob, is a farmer. He's a bit of a stickler and not much of a talker, but I know he loves his family deeply, and I believe we've built a good relationship over the years as a married couple. Thanks to that, as a full-time housewife, I lead a peaceful life at home. Is what I wish I could say, but I live with my eldest son and his wife. I have 2 children, my eldest son, John, who is turning 42 this year, and my second son, James, who is 38. John got married late, and he brought his wife, Catherine, home only last year. Catherine seems to be working in a nightclub, and her flashy clothes and hairstyle shocked me at first. She's 40 this year, but she does look younger. She must be leveraging her looks in her work. She and my jobless eldest son, who is still working part-time jobs, seem to be a perfect match. My second son, on the other hand, is still single and works as an office worker. Unlike John, who has an attitude, James is a gentle and kind child. I sometimes worry that he might not be popular with the girls because he's too kind. But that's also one of James' charms, so I want him to stay that way. Being blessed with 2 children, I wish I could say that my life was smooth sailing, but my peaceful life is now threatened by my eldest son and his wife. All this started from the moment I met my eldest son's wife. 1 year ago, Catherine, my eldest son's wife, came to our house for the first time. At that time, my husband was out at a gathering with neighboring farmers, and I was home alone. To begin with, John hadn't said anything about getting married, so I was surprised when he suddenly said, "I'm bringing my girlfriend home today." Furthermore, when I asked for more details, Catherine was not just a girlfriend, but someone he had already married a month ago. I was dumbfounded and scolded my eldest son, who had registered their marriage without even telling me about it. "You should have at least brought her to greet us before getting married, right? Have you even met her parents? When did all of this even happen? Oh, give me a break. I'm not a kid. I don't need to consult my parents for everything. Stop nagging me." Looking at my eldest son's condescending attitude as if he was belittling me, I wondered where I had gone wrong raising him. As for parenting, I've done about the same for both John and James, so it's surprising that they turned out to have such different personalities. Anyway, please get your life sorted here on out. Now I don't even know how to greet your wife's parents. Yeah. I was slightly annoyed at the nonchalant tone in his response, as if he wasn't taking me seriously at all. But I swallowed my anger, knowing that it would get us nowhere if we kept arguing. As planned, John's wife came to our house later, immediately shouting, "Wow, this house is so cramped!" Indeed, our house is not spacious. We bought this second-hand house 35 years ago, did some interior remodeling, and started living here. All our friends were building new houses, so ours looked quite dated compared to others, and the old-fashioned architecture was quite apparent. But I loved our house. Thanks to my husband's hard work, we were able to buy a house that, while not our dream home, was cozy enough. We made adjustments when remodeling while taking in our layout into consideration. Thanks to this, we have a space that is perfect for our lifestyle. John's wife mocked our house the moment she stepped her foot in here, and I just couldn't believe how she had the nerve to say such a thing. Right? It's shabby and cramped and not cozy enough. Both Mom and Dad are too stubborn to buy a new house. John, who lived with us in this house up until 15 years ago, joined in her laughter. He's renting an apartment and living there now, but doesn't he have fond memories of this house too? This was a surprise to me, but I guess it's fitting for an old lady like you. She just met me for the first time, but glared at me and made snide remarks. I was flabbergasted. Not only did she mock our house, but she even had the audacity to speak ill of her mother-in-law. I'm sorry our house is so small. As you can imagine, the time after that was hell. I was so shocked by the words from John's wife that I was barely able to serve tea or sweets, and the couple just stared at me in disbelief. Hey, at least be prepared to welcome us. Poor Catherine, you gotta welcome her with love. Spilling tea? Are you a newbie waitress or something? I endured the scene by plugging my ears to block Catherine's laughter. I'm sorry. I don't want this daughter-in-law to ever set foot in our house again. I prayed for him never to bring her over again. However, my prayer was never heard, and about half a year ago, John called me. It was bad news. Starting next week, Catherine and I will be living with you, okay? Live together? Why? Why not? There's no mortgage payment left for your house anymore, right? So it doesn't matter if 1 or 2 more people move in. You're not losing anything. I couldn't comprehend what John was saying. I was totally against living together with them. People always talk about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law issues, and I bet John's wife would hate to live together too. Above all, I didn't think I could live a normal life with John's wife. I don't want you guys to move in here. I don't want any problems anyway. And first of all, has Catherine agreed to this? Catherine says she's just fine with it. I got an okay from her yesterday, so we'll be moving in next week. Wait, just a minute. The call ended before I could reply. From next week, John and his wife are moving in here? I shivered at the thought. That night, I decided to discuss it with my husband. I don't see a problem with it. Excuse me? I'm fine as long as Catherine is fine with it. They can help with living expenses after all. I doubt that, though. My husband, oblivious to Catherine's personality, was down to have them live with us. Our daughter-in-law herself said she's fine with it, so I understand why my husband isn't opposed to all this. But the problem is that our daughter-in-law can be a rather insensitive individual. If my husband is fine with it, then I guess it can't be helped. It's our son's request, after all. I couldn't quite turn him away, so I told him that we agreed on letting him and his wife move in here. But in return, you must contribute to our household expenses, got it? Yeah, I know. His nonchalant response made me wonder if this was going to be okay, but he's already in his 40s. I shouldn't have trouble having him pay for our expenses. And so, half a year ago, my eldest son and his wife moved in with us. At first, contrary to my fears, both of them were quiet and kept to themselves. I was fed up with how they barely helped around the house, but seeing my son go to work during the day and his wife doing the same at night, I refrained from meddling. However, both my son and his wife were living on opposite schedules, and I wondered how they managed to keep their marriage going. But it wasn't my place to pry into their business. While they stayed with us, the couple hardly ever talked to my husband. Given their work schedules and lifestyle differences, it was somewhat understandable, and my husband never took the initiative to strike up a conversation either. And like that, the first month passed without any major issues. It was around that time that I approached my son about our living expenses. Living expenses? You can't seriously think I have that kind of money. What? What he said was different from what we had agreed on before, so I was taken aback. Why should Catherine and I have to pay you? You don't have a mortgage to pay off, so don't be so stingy. With that, he left for his part-time job. Oh, God. Even though I had my doubts about living together, I reluctantly agreed only under the condition that they would help out with our living expenses. Not contributing even a cent is unacceptable. I told the same thing to Catherine, but her response was, "Huh? Get the money from John." She didn't take me seriously either. I finally realized I had been played by my son and his wife. From there, things only got worse. Perhaps because they were annoyed by me being a housewife, they started making snide remarks at me whenever they got the chance. Must be nice being old. You can live freely on your pension without having to work. That's right. You should at least do our laundry since you're not working. They said that I should have it easy since I don't work, and that I should do all the chores since I'm a housewife, but they wouldn't contribute to our living expenses. Their comments were absurd. I tried to avoid their complaints as much as possible and endured their behavior. To make matters worse, they would always bully me when my husband was not around. They know that I'm getting old and I don't have the energy or the will to fight back. When will this old hag leave? It'd be better without her around. Even Catherine, who used to mock this house for being small, was making comments. Their bullying didn't stop at verbal abuse. Hey, what's with this new shelf? I replaced that old shabby dresser. It was so outdated. This one's cuter anyway. To my astonishment, they had thrown away our family heirlooms and replaced them with a new furniture while I was out. Worse, they'd chosen flashy foreign-style furnishings that didn't match our aesthetic in the slightest. Oh no, my mother's mementos. I fell into a state of despair when I saw that they had even thrown out my dresser that I had cherished and the chest I had inherited from my mother. Why would you throw away other stuff without even asking? Even I lost my temper at this point and raised my voice in anger, but they were unbothered. It's no big deal. What's the point in holding on to mementos? With every change of furniture, I was overwhelmed by the horrifying feeling that my home was being taken over. And what made me even angrier was that they didn't contribute to the household expenses at all, but they had the money to buy furniture. My husband was busy with work and didn't have time to worry about what was going on at home, so he just watched John and Catherine in silence. This is our home too, so we can do whatever we want, right? I felt an inexplicable fear toward Catherine, who smiled smugly at me. As these incidents piled up, I was mentally drained. Then, as if to add insult to injury, my husband collapsed from overwork. This happened just a month ago. He needs to rest for a while. I was shocked by the doctor's words. I felt so guilty for not noticing my husband's exhaustion because I was too busy dealing with John and his wife. Is that so? I'm sorry, Mary. No, I'm sorry. I didn't notice. You need rest, honey. I'll be back as soon as possible. My husband said that, but his condition didn't improve much, and a month has passed since then. As expected, the harassment from John and his wife worsened while my husband was away. They broke dishes, pushed me from behind, and made me fall. It was blatant physical abuse, but I was too worried about my husband to think about myself. And then the day finally came. I was doing laundry as usual in the morning. That's when I began to feel feverish. My head felt slightly painful. I measured my temperature just in case, and it was 99.5 degrees Fahrenheit. A mild fever. I was taken aback because I hadn't had a fever in years. I was probably worn out from everything I was going through. I was afraid I might faint if I continued work while standing, so I laid down on the couch in the living room. I should be fine in a few minutes. Since my son and his wife were still asleep, I thought no one would complain about me lying down for a bit. However, the living room door opened. John and his wife entered with large suitcases. "Mom, what are you doing there? Hurry up and do the laundry." Wow, she's so lazy for a full-time housewife. Pathetic. Well, I just have a slight fever today. I'll get up as soon as I rest for a bit, so wait. No, we can't wait. We're about to go out." Indeed, I could guess from their large luggage that they were about to go somewhere, but where were they going? "We're going to visit my parents' house." "Oh, I see. Safe travels." "Before you go, could you bring me some water? My throat is all dry." I felt relieved when I heard that they were going to visit Catherine's parents and asked them to bring me some water. Even if they were mean to me, I thought they would do at least that much. "Huh? Do it yourself." "Well, fine. I'll bring it to you." Catherine, muttering under her breath, disappeared into the kitchen. She was back after a while, and out of the blue, splash! Something splashed on my face, and I was left speechless. "You reek! So funny, all covered in wine." Catherine, with the eyes of a demon, looks down on me and bursts into loud laughter. She had splashed wine on me while I was laying down sick. With my consciousness fading, her heartless words and deeds pierced my heart. "We're going back home now, so finish all the chores by the time we get back. Don't leave a speck of dust." Her comments are so harsh, I am convinced that she's possessed by a devil. "Wow, that's lame, Catherine. You are so mean." Even my eldest son, joining in on his wife's behavior, claps his hands and bursts into laughter behind her. How did he end up like this? He's not my child anymore. Now I'm sure of it. "No problem. This is nothing. So you're gonna clean the house, right? Not like you have any choice anyway." She looks down on me. "Ew," is all she says. "Yes, I'll do the cleaning." Unable to fight against her, I replied, biting my lips. The house better be clean by the time we get back. If not..." "Okay." I was down with fever, so I reluctantly agreed to her. But deep down, my blood was boiling with anger. I couldn't forgive my eldest son and his wife anymore. Catherine, who had splashed wine on my face, hastily left the house with John. The bitter frustration and the smell of strong wine made me grimace, but my condition only worsened as time passed, and I couldn't even get up to wash my face. Lying down, unable to do anything, right when my consciousness began to fade, I heard the front door open. "I'm home." The familiar voice made me open my eyes in surprise. "Honey?" "Mary, what happened?" My husband, seeing me lying weakly on the sofa, immediately rushed over to me. "What is this smell? Did something happen?" "Catherine and John did this to me." Upon seeing my beloved husband's face suddenly, I couldn't contain my emotions, and I confessed everything that the two had been doing to me. It had been a while since the last time I saw my husband. In the middle of it all, I couldn't hold back my tears and started crying like a child. "I see. I'm sorry I never noticed." "No, I'm sorry for not telling you properly, but why did you come back?" "The doctor told me I could go home because my condition has improved. I wanted to see you as soon as possible." "I see. Thank you, honey." After that, my husband gently wiped my wine-soaked face with a damp towel and carried me to the bed. He tucked me under a warm blanket and even prepared a light meal and a drink that was easy on my stomach, which brought tears to my eyes. I can't stand it anymore. Although they are our son and his wife, I can't tolerate them anymore. They don't contribute to the household expenses, and on top of that, they are just awful. You're right. After hearing about all they did, I completely understand you. We can't live in this house anymore. My husband and I were enraged. We contemplated how to fight back against John and his wife. Ideally, we'd like to kick them out of this house, but they wouldn't just leave because we asked them to. So we had no other choice but to take a different approach. To put it blunt, our plan was a forceful operation. It was something we had been slowly putting into action. Finally, the time had come for us to execute it. Surely it would be a very effective strategy against them, who had constantly ridiculed me and my home. I met my husband's eyes and nodded. It's showtime. Over the course of the several weeks, we carried out our plan, and things had finally settled. One day, we were relaxing on our living room sofa when my phone rang. It was from John. I chuckled. Finally, the moment had come. Swallowing hard, I answered the phone, trying to calm my pounding heart. "Hey, you old hag, what the hell is going on here?" Startled by the sudden barrage of abuse from the other end of the phone, I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear. "Well, what's the matter? Aren't you at Catherine's parents' place?" "We just got back home, but why is our house gone?" John's frantic voice was so funny to me, I struggled to hold back my laughter. "Well, you remember how Catherine told me to leave the house cleaned by the time you guys got back? So we did. We cleaned the whole house. Not a speck of dust left, right?" Yes, I took Catherine's word and used it against them. Sold the house and moved out, leaving nothing behind. It was something we had been considering ever since my husband collapsed from fatigue. We were getting older. Farming is labor demanding. We considered giving it up and living out our retirement years in peace. I thought my workaholic husband would oppose the idea, but he was so affected by his collapse that he readily agreed to my suggestion. We always had inquiries about having our land for sale, so we were able to sell it with no problem. Things moved quickly after that, and before we knew it, our house was completely gone. We loved our previous house, but it was much easier for us to sell it off than plan about who to pass it down to. We moved to a rental apartment in the neighboring state. We thought it would be hard to take out a mortgage for a house at our age, so we agreed that a rental would be fine. And now I'm on the phone with John from our new home. "What the hell did you do? Do you think you can get away with this? What are we supposed to do now?" Hearing the yelling from the other end of the line, I couldn't help but sigh. What the hell did I do? You guys are the ones who ruined everything for us. What are you saying? Barging into someone else's home and making a mess, not contributing to the household expenses. Bullying an old woman like me. Was it fun? Call me every name under the sun. I don't care. Damn it. John grunted in anger, and I couldn't help but chuckle. They probably never imagined the house would be gone. Just the thought of them standing in front of an empty lot dumbfounded was cracking me up. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" John passed the phone to his wife. I remembered her smug smile when she poured wine on me and felt nauseous. "It's my house, and I'll do as I please. It's none of your business." "It is totally my business. We lived here too. It's our home as well." "Huh, our home? You never helped around the house or paid any bills. How dare you claim it is your place? Besides, I know something about you, Catherine." "What?" "You quit your job a while ago, didn't you? Or were you fired? Either way, it doesn't really matter. Yet you leave home every night saying you're heading to work. What have you been doing exactly?" You're cheating, aren't you? Want me to tell John about this?" "What did you say?" She didn't deny it, so I guess I was right. I had a hunch that Catherine has been cheating for several months now. She comes home from work at odd hours every day, and I started to notice a peculiar smell of perfume on her laundry, but she never wore them before. She might be able to fool my stupid son, but she can't fool me. You can't just run away when things get tough after all the things you did to us. Get out of my place right now." "Fine, I get it. There's no way I can live in this dump anyway." Sounds like she has given up. With a rustling sound, she seemed to be leaving the lot. "Hey, where are you going?" "I can't stay here any longer. I'm going back to my parents' house. Goodbye." "Hey, wait a minute." John's confused voice echoed. He had no idea he was being cheated on. When Catherine left, he took out all of his anger on me. "Old hag, what the hell did you say to Catherine?" "I only told her I would spill the beans about her affair to you." "What?" The way my John fell apart after that was terrible. Unable to accept the reality, he cursed and shouted harsh words like "shit" and "why the hell?" Then he started yelling at me. "How could you do this to me? I'm your son, for God's sake. You took it too far." After all the things he did, my son was still trying to play the victim. I started to feel bad for him. He's so pathetic. But that doesn't mean I'm ever going to live with him again. My son? You are no longer my son. Oh, and one more thing. What? Your phone contract is about to end soon, so this really is our goodbye. Huh? My son couldn't even breathe right and just gawked. I had canceled my son's phone contract, which he had made me pay since he moved in. The contract ends this month, but today's already the last day of the month. From tomorrow, my son's phone will be useless. Now I can finally cut ties with you. Goodbye. Hey! Without waiting for a reply, I hung up the phone. I felt all the energy drain out of me in an instant, and I slumped onto the sofa. My husband said, "Good job," and brought me a warm cup of tea. Finally, I can sever ties with my eldest son. Just thinking about it seemed to heal all the hardships I had gone through. A week later, our intercom rang. I went up to check the intercom screen and saw my second son. The screen lets us see who's at the door without leaving the comfort of our living room. "Hey, Mom, it's been a while." "Well, if it isn't James. So nice of you to visit us. Come in." As I reached to press the open button for the door, a gruff voice suddenly commanded, "Move it. I finally found you, you old hag. Open up now." To my surprise, John popped up, even though we never gave him our address. I wondered if he hired a detective or something. "Open up? I bet you're just here to try and steal some money. Just leave right now." Keep talking like that and we'll see what will happen to this guy." John took out a blade that looked like a knife from his pocket. The sight made me shriek in fright, but I was more worried about James being in danger. I needed to do something quickly. "Bro, what are you doing?" You've been looking down on me. An office worker, you said. You make me sick." "Bro, aren't you ashamed of yourself? Leeching off Mom and Dad's money? Living like a parasite? You son of a..." Oh no, James is in trouble. Just when I blanked out in fear, I heard the blaring siren of a police car, followed by the sound of heavy boots approaching. "We're arresting you for attempted murder. Come with us." "Hey, wait, what the hell?" Through the screen, I saw John get taken down by the police with his knife still in his hands. That's as far as I saw. I'm guessing that the neighbors called the cops after hearing the commotion at our place. According to James, his brother had a crazed look in his eyes, barely recognizable as his brother he once knew. "Mom, sorry it's late, but I'm getting married." "Oh really? Congratulations." "Thank you." Receiving such joyous news from James, my husband and I were overwhelmed with happiness, and we celebrated the occasion by having a feast with him. I am more satisfied with just this child. Our eldest son can live his own separate life. My husband also seemed relieved that we were finally free of him. After that, John was taken by the police, and it was discovered that he had committed other crimes like theft and intimidation. The duration of his imprisonment is yet to be decided. Of course, he lost his part-time job. I felt profound sadness, wondering where I went wrong in raising a child who would resort to such crimes. Even though Catherine went back to her parents' home, it seems her irresponsible lifestyle hadn't changed, and I heard rumors that she was kicked out of there too. Turns out that a man she was having an affair with was married with kids, and now she's being sued by his wife. It's a disaster for her, but it's karma. Of course, John and Catherine had gotten divorced. I have stopped thinking about John and I'm moving on, heading toward a new future in our new home. "Mom, this is Rachel. She works as a pharmacist at a pharmacy near my workplace." "Hello, mother-in-law. Nice to meet you." "Rachel, nice to meet you too." The fiancé James brought home, Rachel, was a 32-year-old woman, polite, intelligent, and instantly likable. It's going to get busy, isn't it? But I'm looking forward to it. James, Rachel, my husband and I all had dinner together, sharing laughter. One day we'll gather around the table together again with our grandchild. Just imagining it was a beautiful scene.
"Is that all you've got?" Nancy looked down at me with disdain, and I felt my stomach churn, but I held it in. She seemed unaware of my discomfort as she whispered something into James' ear. Annoyed by my gaze, James pushed Nancy aside and confronted me. "What's your problem? Don't take it out on us just because you're not talented." Seeing James puff himself up like that only made me feel worse, but I chose to remain silent. Arguing with him would only bring me down to his level.
If only we'd put James in charge from the start instead of you clinging to pointless pride.
Nancy sneered, and that's when I lost my temper. "All right then, why don't you tell me what's so crucial about running a company?" I'd been ignoring their issues up until now, but being directly attacked like this was more than I could take. At this point, I had to raise my voice against James and Nancy, who wouldn't hesitate to treat employees like disposable pawns if it served their purpose. Dumbfounded, James had nothing to say, so I turned to Nancy. "If you have any intention of supporting James as his wife, you can at least offer that advice, can't you?" Caught off guard, Nancy was at a loss for words, her eyes darting around aimlessly. "My name is Emma. I am a 32-year-old single woman who runs a company. My family has been in the business since my grandfather Robert's time, and he's now retired and enjoying his life. My dad, Richard, was supposed to take over the business, but he had other ambitions and chose not to. I have a partner named James, but like Richard, he's always following his passion instead of joining the family business. Richard became a world-renowned musician, and in his stead, I now run the company founded by Robert. We grew up in a fairly affluent household, but our lifestyle is anything but extravagant. Robert always says, "Once you raise your standard of living, it's almost impossible to lower it. You'll just keep wanting more and it will be irreversible." Having lived through this himself, it's become something of a family motto. Even though Robert has had great success running a business and Richard is a successful musician, our family's lifestyle hasn't changed a bit. Birthdays, school admissions, graduations. We might splurge a little on special occasions, but you won't find us driving luxury cars or surrounded by designer brands all the time. The extra money usually goes back into the business or is donated to good causes. For me, living modestly has just become second nature. I don't flaunt my family's business achievements to old school friends either. To be honest, back when I was in high school, I casually told a boyfriend that my family was well off. His attitude changed overnight. He started expecting high-end gifts to his birthday, and suddenly, I was the one paying for everything on our dates. I was hesitant to talk about our financial situation after that, especially since I was getting my allowance from my mom, Jennifer. I didn't want to attract people who were just after my money. At the time, I was working for Robert's company. I never disclosed that I was Robert's grandchild and was treated the same as any other employee. I kept it that way to avoid jealousy and gossip in the office. Then one day, James introduced us to a woman named Nancy, who later became his wife. Richard was away on a world tour as a musician at that time, so it was Jennifer and Robert who welcomed her. Based on what I heard after getting back from work, Robert wasn't impressed, and neither was Jennifer. However, Richard later said it was all good if they were in love. Nancy eventually became my sister-in-law. Fast forward to a New Year's celebration, James and Nancy visited our family home. Richard also happened to be home, making it a full house of 6. Somehow, the topic shifted to my salary, and James and Nancy started criticizing me. "Why is your salary so low, Emma?"
You're the grandchild of the boss. You should have a lot more sway.
By that time, Robert, who normally would have put James in his place, had already gone to bed. Jennifer was busy preparing soup in the kitchen. Richard, who wasn't fully aware of my current situation, simply watched our exchange quietly. "I make it what I make because I'm still learning. It's as simple as that." Taking into account that I was already making a higher salary than those who'd been at the company longer, just because I'm the CEO's grandchild, I had a heated argument with the ever-complaining James. Just because I get special treatment doesn't mean it's worth anything if I can contribute to the company. Plus, having extra money doesn't make sense if you have no use for it.
Come on, there's plenty of ways to use money. Shouldn't you be more considerate of us?
I frowned at Nancy's argument, not really understanding her point. I glanced at Richard, but he was engrossed in watching TV, so I couldn't gauge his reaction. Honestly, I'm satisfied with my current salary and don't have any complaints about my working conditions, mostly because I can buy anything I want. However, it seemed like James and his wife weren't pleased with what I was saying. Despite the family tension during the New Year's celebration, I kept my work and personal life separate and tackled my job responsibilities diligently after the holiday. A few days after returning to work, I was taking a short break at home when James called. When I answered, he apologized for the previous disagreement.
Sorry about the other day. Got carried away being back home after so long. Money isn't everything, you know. Nancy always says she's sorry for overstepping.
I was left speechless by James' subdued apology. It was true that James and Nancy had both been drinking that night, and being back home after so long probably made them bolder than usual. I was bothered by Nancy's words, but since they seemed repentant, I decided to let it go this time. From then on, I poured myself into my work even more and enjoyed a fulfilling life. Eventually, my hard work started paying off, and there were even talks of a promotion. When I got home, Robert was waiting for me at the entrance, and I was summoned to his room.
You've been working hard, it seems. It's about time I started teaching you my responsibilities. Plan on taking over the company eventually, and stick with me.
Hearing these words, I felt invigorated. I had studied economics in college to prepare myself for eventually taking over the company. My efforts to not only improve my department, but the entire company were finally bearing fruit. Still, being told about taking over the company sooner than I had expected left me somewhat shaken. I had no time to dwell on it, as Robert immediately began mentoring me intensively. Engrossed in absorbing all the knowledge he was imparting, I had completely forgotten about James and Nancy. After my days of intense training with Robert, I was worn out every time I came home. But soon, Robert retired.
Emma, you've done well. I trust that you can take it from here. Do your best.
With that, he built an annex on the property and is now enjoying his leisurely retirement. A while after I officially took over the company, James called me again.
Emma, I got something to discuss with you.
Feeling a sense of unease, I listen as James starts talking apologetically.
Hey, I need a favor. It's Nancy's birthday this month, and
James tells me he wants to get Nancy a birthday gift. For the past few years, he's managed to scrape something together, but this year, he found an accessory that would be perfect for Nancy, and he really wants to give it to her. He didn't look for other gifts, but he couldn't shake the thought of that accessory. Basically, he wants to borrow money, but if it's for Nancy's birthday gift, I can say no. It's around $300, so I happily agree. Not long after, I get a call from Nancy. I'm surprised as this is rare. I answer, and she's thanking me for the gift. James must have told her that I helped him out. I couldn't help but find it endearing that he told her, even if he didn't have to.
So here's the thing,
she says.
We're planning a trip together, but we're a little short on cash. Can you help us out? We'll pay you back quickly.
Feeling this might be a high-value return gift for what I did for James, I happily agree again. After that, the couple started asking to borrow money from me for all sorts of things. At first, It was easy to say yes. But as time went on, their attitude changed and the amount started to increase. Finally, losing trust in the couple, I ignored a new call from Nancy. Then I got incessant calls from both James and Nancy. Annoyed, I finally pick up a call from Nancy, and the first thing she does is yell at me.
Why aren't you picking up? I've been calling you over and over.
Let me guess, Nancy, you need money again? Silenced for a moment. Her voice raises again.
What's that tone? I'm spending the money so it won't go to waste in your business, you know?
That makes no sense. You're spending my money. Frustrated, she raises her voice even further.
Emma, how much are you making a year?
Suspicious, I answer. Right now, I'm only making around $30,000. I just started in my position. Hearing that, Nancy snorts and her attitude inflates.
That's what you get for being so showy and not letting James take over the business.
Letting James taking over the business? What is she talking about? James told everyone he didn't want to take over Robert's company, opting to move out and chase his dream of becoming a musician. So why are we even talking about James? Before I could muster up a response, she said,
Look, I need $5,000 by the day after tomorrow. Make sure it's ready.
She hung up without waiting for a reply, and the room fell silent. I used to give her up to $2,000, but now she's demanding $5,000 all of a sudden. What's more, her whole attitude and comments like, be more considerate, were irking me, so I decided to go to Robert, who was in a separate building. I told Robert everything, and he let out a deep sigh. I knew I was going to get scolded for lending money too easily. Richard has musical talent. That's why I let him do his thing. James, however, has nothing. Even if he joined the company, he wouldn't amount to anything. I always knew it. For a moment, I wondered what they were talking about, then realized it was about Richard and James. Sure enough, the choices Richard and James made are similar. Neither of them took over Robert's company, and both of them are interested in something music-related. But the crucial difference was their willingness to work hard. Richard thought for himself, brainstormed, and searched for the best ways to achieve what he wanted. James, on the other hand, simply copied Richard and chose to pursue music because he didn't want to work. I knew Richard had succeeded while James was still struggling. I also never liked James' wife, just so you know, Robert said, sighing and holding his head in his hands. Emma, listen carefully. You need to do exactly as I say from now on. Confused, I nodded and clenched my teeth, imagining what would unfold next. First, I contacted Richard. Luckily, he was still in the States, and he promised to align his plans after I explained the situation. Next, I spoke to Jennifer. She listened quietly, her eyes downcast, but nodded firmly when I finished talking. I then prepared for the next day, waking up with mixed feelings. The following morning, I went to the bank to withdraw the money before heading to the office. I settled into my still unfamiliar office chair, took a deep breath, and reached out to James. After a while, I received a message that James and his wife were causing a commotion in the reception area, so I invited them into my office. Emma, what do you mean you won't support us anymore? James immediately yelled at me. I gestured for them to sit, but both James and his wife continued yelling without taking a seat. I let out a sigh and moved to the reception area's couch, placing an envelope quietly on the table. Immediately, Nancy sat on the couch across from me and checked the contents of the envelope.
Hey, this isn't enough. What's the deal?
Hearing this, James sat next to Nancy, and they both examined what was inside the envelope. Wait, why is this only half? We agreed on 5,000, didn't we? That's right. The envelope only contained half of the money they had demanded. As for the amount, Robert had told me to decide on the final severance package myself. This is the best I can do. I can't afford to give any more. Upon hearing this, James and Nancy scoffed at me.
That's it? Business not doing so well?
Ignoring my annoyed expression, Nancy whispered something in James' ear. Not liking the look in my eyes, James shoved Nancy aside and confronted me.
Don't take your lack of business skills out on us.
Rather than respond, I chose to remain silent, not wanting to stoop to their level.
If you had left the company to James from the start, none of this would have happened.
Nancy sneered. At that point, my patience snapped. There's no way James, who shrinks employment to pursue music and leans on parental privilege, could manage a business. Add to that their parasitic lifestyle, living off me, and now trying to depend on Robert's company. If you're going to say that, I hope you understand what's important in running a business. Normally, I'd let things slide to avoid issues, but even I have my limits. Outraged by James and Nancy's self-serving attitude, treating employees like pawns, I finally raised my voice. I looked at James, whose mouth was agape, then turned to Nancy. If you plan on supporting James as his wife, I hope you can at least give some sound advice. Nancy, who never expected the conversation to turn on her, stuttered and said nothing. Neither wanting to join Robert's company nor working hard like Richard, I can entrust my business to people like you? The money I can give is all I have. Why don't you come over tonight? I said that and kicked James and Nancy out of the office, then returned to my own. I apologized to the employee who came to check on the commotion and refocused on the day's work. That night, James and his wife happily showed up. But when they found Robert wearing an almost devilish expression, Richard completely poker-faced, and Jennifer, who had her back turned to everyone. "Sit wherever you like, okay?" I said, taking a seat at the kitchen table and gesturing for James and his wife to do the same. Instead, they chose to sit formally on their knees in front of the living room sofa where Robert and Richard were sitting. Clearly, they were putting on airs, but didn't dare to act disrespectful in front of Robert. Next to speak was Richard.
James, Nancy, what are your plans for the future?
Caught off guard by Richard's words, James and his wife exchanged bewildered glances and said nothing.
James!
When Richard called out his name, James visibly flinched and cautiously looked up.
When will you be making your debut, James?
It looked like James couldn't comprehend the question, staring blankly at Richard. Richard said no more, just holding James in his gaze.
Nancy?
Growing impatient, Robert spoke up, addressing Nancy, whose face paled under the weight of his words.
Do you really think the company will do better under James than Emma? And if so, why?
Nancy had no answer and looked down in silence. For a while, no one said anything. The only sound was Jennifer cooking in the background. Eventually, an array of dishes lined in the kitchen counter, and Jennifer took a satisfied breath. "All right, James, Nancy, come on over. Let's eat before it gets cold." At Jennifer's words, everyone gathered in the kitchen and quietly took their seats. The tense meal commenced, and even Jennifer's usually delicious cooking seemed to lack flavor. After we finished eating and Richard and I were clearing the table, Jennifer served coffee. She placed cups in front of Robert and James and his wife, then took a seat next to Robert. "How was your last supper, James?"
What? Jennifer, what are you talking about?
"Starting today, you are no longer our son, James. And Nancy, sorry, but please stay away from this house and from Emma. That includes her company as well." Ignoring my startled glance back, Richard starts doing the dishes. Robert sits in silence, sipping his coffee. Sure, I had asked Jennifer to scold James, but I never expected this. Unfazed by our astonishment, Jennifer continues. We've been lenient with James because of Richard, but that was a mistake. I thought it was just a phase. James asking for increasingly expensive gifts each year, but it turns out I was wrong. Jennifer locks eyes with James, who lowers his gaze and shrugs his shoulders.
And Nancy, you love brand name items, don't you? We don't live that sort of lifestyle here. You better work hard to earn them yourself.
Upon closer inspection, Nancy, clad in luxury brands that even I've heard of, awkwardly shrinks into herself.
So that's how it is? Use the money you got from Emma wisely and just leave?
With that, Jennifer exits the kitchen. Richard finishes cleaning up and heads upstairs. Robert drains his cup of tea, washes it in the sink, and goes back to the annex. I observe James and his wife for a moment, sigh, and decide to retreat to my room. Almost immediately, I hear arguing voices from the kitchen, but I chose to ignore them. I hear the front door close, so I plan for tomorrow's work, and finally the house grows quiet. It seems James and his wife have left. In the end, they ended up divorcing. James, who had been chasing a dream of becoming a musician, had no stable income. Nancy, for her part, had been financially reliant on her own parents. Their situation reached a breaking point. Both were disowned, and at first, Nancy juggled part-time jobs while living with James. But their unsustainable lifestyle caught up to them, and their marriage crumbled under the weight of debt. As for James, he seems to have come to terms with his limitations and has given up his musician dreams. He is now working as a day laborer to repay his debts. James and I were raised in the same environment. Our family was well off, but frugal. James had been unhappy for a long time about our lifestyle, fueled by the illusion that, like Richard, he could achieve wealth without traditional employment. So he chose to live frivolously, being taken care of after marriage. Unfortunately for Nancy, she had married James hoping for a slice of the pie, and this is how it ended. I don't understand how someone could think that way, but it seems that James lacks the qualities of a good manager and doesn't have Richard's talents. His choice to avoid hard work led to his disownment and divorce. As for me, I'd been diligently doing what I can, improving performance even before Robert's retirement. The employees also seem happy, so for now, I'm relieved. I haven't seen James or Nancy since, but that doesn't matter. I am too absorbed in my work to care. I plan to continue pushing forward, growing the company.
I'm Caroline, a 27-year-old housewife. I've been married for 2 years to my husband Lucas, who's the same age as me. We finally moved into a house we started building right after getting married, and life has settled down a bit. Lucas and I met at work. We were fortunate to work at a great company where overtime was rare, so when we first started dating, we had plenty of time for each other. We moved in together pretty quickly and got married after 3 years. Our plan was to have kids once we settled into our new home, so I left my job to focus solely on homemaking. After I quit, I thought life would get easier, but Lucas started working late more frequently. I asked him what was going on, and he said he was dealing with issues at various clients. I noticed that he had been looking more stressed lately. To help him, I made sure everything was ready for him when he got home, even cooking meals he would enjoy. But his attitude started getting worse. He would sometimes shout, "Why are you making the same meals? If you know I'm coming home tired, you should prepare some snacks to go with my drink." I had never seen this side of Lucas, so I apologized and promised to prepare what he wanted next time. I couldn't help but wonder if work was really causing this change in him. When I thought about the company where I used to work, I never thought they would push people this hard to work. As Lucas started working more and more on holidays, I thought maybe I should check with the company about this. However, when I confirmed the facts about overtime with my friend and former colleague Kaylee, she said, "What? There's hardly any overtime. Everyone leaves on time, just like when you, Caroline, were here." Nothing seemed to have changed with Lucas at work either, which left me increasingly confused. However, soon after that, his late nights began to decrease, and gradually the old Lucas came back. So I decided not to dig too deep into it, thinking it might just be stress accumulation. From then on, there were a few nights when he came back late, but I assumed he was probably out drinking to relieve stress, and I decided not to make a big deal out of it, and waited for him to come home as usual. Half a year after all that drama, my dad got sick. The prognosis wasn't good, so I was thinking about having him stay with us since we lived close to my parents' home. I had lost my mom when I was a student, and it had been just me and Dad ever since. He had funded my college education, and I was extremely grateful. I had always felt supported by him and wanted to spend his final days together. I decided to discuss it with Lucas. We had designed our new home to be accessible, anticipating future caregiving needs for our parents, so I naturally assumed Lucas would welcome my dad. But when I brought it up, Lucas blurted out, "What? Why do we have to take in your dad? We don't even have kids yet. And you want to move him in before that? Unacceptable." His harsh words took me by surprise. "But Dad doesn't have much time left," I tried to explain, my voice shaking. "I don't care. Your family home is close. You can just visit him there." He dismissed me. So what was the point of making our home caregiving friendly? "I thought that was for both our parents," I argued. But Lucas said, "No, that's for my parents. You're my wife, so you should be looking after my family. Usually people only start taking care of their parents once their kids are grown. Why did your dad have to get sick so soon? My parents aren't like yours, burdening others." I broke down crying. I'd been holding back tears from the moment we found out about my dad's prognosis, but Lucas's cruel words broke me. "If you're going to cry, I don't care. I'm the one paying the mortgage. I make the decisions. If you can't agree, we're getting a divorce. Pack your stuff and get out," Lucas shouted. So I grabbed the essentials and left, going back to live at my parents' place for a while. My dad was concerned, but I assured him, "Lucas says he's fine on his own, so don't worry." My dad responded, "Well, if Lucas says he's okay, then maybe you should go back to him." I couldn't bring myself to tell my dad that Lucas had refused to help, so I just said, "I'll be staying away for a little while." Then after a few weeks back home, Lucas sent me a text. "There's a notice about community association dues. Apparently someone will be collecting them this Sunday. I don't want to deal with it, so you handle it." It read. Though his tone angered me, I was on good terms with the community association president, so it would have seemed odd to be absent during the collection. I went back. After settling the community dues, Lucas immediately said, "Now that you're done, go back to your parents' house. You're just in the way here." And so he tried to send me away again. But when I returned home after being away for a few weeks, something felt off. Freshly laundered clothes neatly hung up, dishes put away. Above all, the house was cleaner than usual. Could Lucas, who can't even clean properly when I'm away for a few days, really manage to keep things so orderly? I also found it odd that his work shirts were hanging perfectly wrinkle-free. "Lucas, you've never used an iron. How did you get these shirts so nice?" I asked, noticing his eyes darting away for a second. "Well, someone's got to do it if no one else is around, right?" Feeling his nervous energy, I decided to push further. "Really? It's like someone's been here," I said. Ignoring my husband's glare, I headed to the bathroom, the best place to find any evidence. I called Lucas over and pointed at a long strand of hair on the bathroom counter. "Whose hair is this?" It wasn't Lucas's, and my own hair is a bright, short cut. The strand was long and black, clearly not ours. Lucas stumbled over his words. "I have no idea. Must have gotten stuck to my clothes or something. Seeing his shaky reaction, I felt more certain, but I chose to hold my tongue until I had concrete proof or a confession from Lucas. So I went back to my parents' house. My father's health had somewhat stabilized, so I decided to start working from home. It was a different field from my previous job, and while there were many new things to learn, I found it fulfilling. Given that I also needed to take care of my dad, this flexible job was a lifesaver. In a way, I started to think that my spat with Lucas had a silver lining. He let me spend quality time with my dad and focus on my own career. But just when I thought life was getting stable, another text from Lucas popped up. Dad's in the hospital. Need you to come help Mom. What happened to all his talk about not worrying about his own parents? Certainly, I had no intention of granting his request. Why should I help? You said your parents wouldn't be a burden, remember? I replied in a cold, unemotional text. He called me right away, saying, Come on, it's a sudden situation. Can't you take care of them for a bit? I'm busy caring for my own father. Weren't you the one who kicked me out? What are you talking about now? I shot back and hung up. Another call came through. Stop this nonsense. You can't keep avoiding home. You'll need me sooner or later. Just come back already. He sounded even more frantic than before. Sighing, I responded, I can manage just fine without you. I found a job. And I hung up again. The next day, Lucas showed up at my parents' house. My parents are moving in with me, and Mom, after Dad gets out of the hospital. Please come help. They said they'd be okay if you were there. I couldn't believe my ears. So his parents were planning on relying on me all along. And yet Lucas was the one who had told me to leave. I'm sorry, but I can't take care of them. It's your house, you handle it. Isn't that why you made it accessible? I tried to dismiss him, but he wouldn't back down. Finally, I'd had enough and showed him the divorce papers I'd prepared. Now, there's no reason for me to care for your parents, is there? What the hell? So you'd rather divorce me than take care of my parents? He yelled. I showed him some incriminating photos I'd obtained earlier. Kathy, my former colleague, sent these to me. She noticed you coming home late and checked up on you. The photos showed him happily bar-hopping with young women. He grabbed them, flustered, but there was no getting out of this. I'll be claiming alimony in the divorce, just so you know. Just then, a voice from the car in the parking lot. It was his mother, Olive. Lucas, hurry up and bring Caroline. I need her to help with dinner. Apparently, Olive had moved in already, and had Lucas forcibly fetch me. Hearing Olive's voice, I told Lucas, why don't you show this evidence to your mom? Maybe then she'll understand why I'm not coming back. Lucas quickly pocketed the photo he'd snatched from me. Stop it. You wouldn't do something like this, would you? His eyes welled up with tears. You made me into someone like this. Plus, I have another photo. I shot back, flashing him the second photo before heading toward the car where Olive was sitting. Long time no see, Olive. I was just about to be volunteered by Lucas to take care of everyone. Let me make this clear. I'm not up for that role. Olive got annoyed at my tone. What's with the attitude? You're my son's wife. You can't just refuse to help with family responsibilities. I gave Lucas a pointed look. Lucas, thinking I might expose his affair, started to calm things down. Mom, Caroline seems busy. Let's go home for now. Olive wasn't satisfied. Lucas, you were just saying how she's a terrible wife for leaving to stay at her parents' home. What's gotten into you? Why am I the only bad guy here? Hearing that, I sighed. Lucas, sensing danger, tried to get into the driver's seat. Let's just go home already. But Olive wouldn't back down. Caroline, you need to come too. If you don't help, who will? That won't be possible. I'm planning on filing for divorce, I said, and started to walk back toward the house. Olive got out of the car to stop me. What do you mean? You're being so selfish. The one who's selfish is your son. I'll be submitting these photos as evidence, and will be seeking compensation. I showed her, freezing Olive in her tracks. Lucas hastily snatched the photo from Olive, but the damage was done. Olive confronted Lucas, but he remained silent. unable to come up with an excuse. "If we're clear, please leave," I said, and walked into my house. Later, Lucas did apologize, but I'm not forgiving him, and am in the process of filing for divorce. Turns out Lucas's brother was supposed to be the one taking care of their parents, but due to his own infidelity, he had divorced his wife and seemingly vanished with his affair partner. Like brother, both are cheaters. It's just pathetic. Lucas's parents had apparently turned to Lucas and me for help, taking the place of my brother, but that didn't work out either. In the end, Lucas couldn't take care of his parents and decided to place them in a facility. It wasn't just because it was tough handling it alone. The woman he was having an affair with said, "I'm living here now, so your parents can't move in." So his parents demanded a facility that met their preferences. Lucas did find a place that satisfied them, but the cost for admission and ongoing fees were pretty steep. Just as he was determined to work harder, his company found out about the affair, and he had to quit his job. Now he's frantically searching for another job. By the way, it turns out he has a child with the woman he was having an affair with. I had no intention of feeling any sympathy for him, as he struggled with the upcoming child-rearing expenses, the compensation money for me, and the cost for his parents' facility. I had a lawyer report the affair to the woman's company, and it seems she was fired too. I've returned to work, and my colleagues, who knew about the situation, welcomed me warmly. Now, I'm enjoying a peaceful life with my father at my childhood home.
Starting today, Mom is moving in with us. She's your mother-in-law, so take good care of her. Without any discussion or notice, my husband Huey brought home his mother, Isadora, announcing that she'd be living with us. To make matters worse, he had decided to turn my room into Isadora's room and dumped my belongings in the hallway. Where am I supposed to sleep now that my room's gone?
"You've got the hallway, haven't you?" he said with a smirk as I turned to face him, incredulous. My name is Gina, and I'm a 38-year-old housewife. 5 years ago, I lost both my parents in a sudden car accident. Having no siblings or relatives, I found myself utterly alone. Craving the connection that comes with family, I was desperate to get married. That's when I met Huey, my current husband. His unwavering commitment, self-assuredness, and above all, his kindness drew me in. We dated, got married 3 months ago, and have been living together since. I used to work as a nurse, but overworked myself to the point of falling seriously ill. The diagnosis? Burnout from excessive work. When I told Huey, he said, "I've been worried you're pushing yourself too hard. Your health is what matters most. Let me handle work. Why don't you wait for me at home?" His concern for my well-being touched my heart. Though hesitant to leave my nursing career, I knew I could return any time thanks to my credentials. So I quit my job and decided to be a full-time housewife. But that's when things began to change between Huey and me. He started to restrict what I could do, saying it was for my own good. But it escalated. Before I knew it, he began to control every aspect of my life. Feeling obligated because he was supporting me financially, I adopted the mindset that I must obey him. Life went on like this for about 6 months, until one day, I returned home from grocery shopping to find Isadora there. I greeted her, thinking she had come for a visit. Heading to my room to put away the groceries, I found all my belongings dumped in the hallway. Confused, I stood there until Huey came to explain. My in-laws divorced when my husband was little, and he was raised by Isadora, his mom. He hadn't seen his father in years and was very attached to Isadora. For quite some time, he'd been planning to have her move in with us, unbeknownst to me. I was stunned to hear that these plans had already been in motion. Just then, my husband dropped another bombshell. "Mom has been doing everything by herself for years. She's getting up there in age, and I want to make her life easier. So, starting tomorrow, make food for 3 people, okay? Take care of all the household chores, and don't bother Mom with them. Got it?"
Before I could fully understand what he was saying, he added unapologetically that since there's no room for Isadora in this house, she'll be using my room, and my belongings were tossed into the hallway because they were in the way. When I asked where I would sleep, both my husband and Isadora just laughed. Saying there was no other place but the hallway. As crazy and unfair as this sounded, my mind quickly became foggy, filled with thoughts that I should fully support this and take care of Isadora. I accepted my husband's ridiculous proposal, saying, "All right, I understand. Let's get along starting today." After all, I owe everything to my husband, and it's only natural to extend gratitude to Isadora who raised him. I was enthusiastic about meeting their demands. Living with Isadora, both she and my husband began to criticize every little thing I did. "You're terrible at washing dishes. Are you really that stupid?" "Today's meal is too salty. Are you trying to kill us?" I became the target of their verbal abuse. So there I was, mentally and physically drained, ultimately spending my nights sleeping in the hallway. I didn't recognize the absurdity of my situation. Whenever I felt tired, I blamed myself for not doing enough and obediently went on with my day. Then one winter day, Isadora ordered me to clean every corner of the house and prepare a dinner worthy of a luxury hotel for someone special she was bringing home. I spent the day scouring the house and shopping for ingredients, frantically researching recipes to create an array of lavish dishes. Once the meal was ready, I was told to stay in the hallway so as not to bother the guests. I complied without question, making sure to stay out of sight. From the laughter that occasionally leaked from the living room, I gathered that Isadora's guest was her current boyfriend. As the night wore on, I heard that the guest would be staying overnight. Isabella told me to wait in the kitchen, adding, "Gina, if Louis finds out you sleep in the hallway, he'll be shocked. It's not a good look. Could you just sleep in the kitchen tonight, okay?" I was used to listening to my husband, so I went to check with him. He seemed to be in a bad mood from work and yelled, "Don't come in here for every little thing. I don't want to see your face," before hitting me. Being hit was nothing new, so I left quickly to avoid making him angrier. Since I couldn't confirm where to sleep with my husband, I decided to sleep in the hallway as usual. Early in the morning, I was awakened by a surprised male voice and looked up to see a man staring down at me. I didn't see his face yesterday, but it's probably Louis, Isadora's boyfriend. "What are you doing here? Do you sleep in this house?" Caught off guard, I told him the truth. I'm Huey's wife and usually sleep in the hallway. Seeing my nonchalant attitude towards the situation, Louis paused, then asked for my contact information. When I told him I didn't have a cell phone because my husband manages it, he suggested meeting at a nearby cafe when the sun comes up. He asked me to come secretly, without telling my husband or Isadora. His serious gaze convinced me to agree. Later, Louis went home, seen off by Isadora and my husband. As the sun rose, I told my family I was going grocery shopping and headed to the cafe where Louis was already waiting. We went inside. While waiting for our drinks, Louis said, "Actually, I've invited another person today." Shortly after, a woman he knows arrives. "Nice to meet you. I'm Eileen. I've known Louis for a long time." Eileen was an excellent listener, and we had a lively chat. It had been a while since I talked to someone other than my husband and Isadora. I realized I had almost forgotten how to communicate, and I had a great time. On the way home, Eileen, sensing something was off, kindly asked me about my life. I told her the truth, and she invited me for tea again the next day. I agreed. For several days, our morning tea and casual chats continued. As I spoke to Eileen in the cafe, I started to feel something was wrong with my current life. I became emotional during our talks. It was then that I finally realized my current environment was unjust. Eileen softly smiled, gently wiping away my tears with a handkerchief. It turns out Eileen is a mental health professional. Lewis had noticed something was off and asked her to come to listen. Eileen explained that if she had immediately pointed out that my husband and Isadora were the issue, I might have closed off. So she took the time to support me, helping me slowly realize what was going on. At first, I listened to you because it was a job required, but now it's different. I want to help Gina as a friend. If Gina wants our help, we're here, always ready to lend a hand. Hearing these warm words, I can't stop the tears from flowing. Eileen gently rubs my back as I continue to cry uncontrollably. When I finally stop crying, it's time to part ways with Eileen and head home. As we say goodbye, she assures me, "We're always on your side." On the way home, my clouded thoughts finally clear, filling me with a newfound sense of relief. That night, when my husband starts complaining about my cooking again, for the first time, I retort, "If it's too bland for you, add your own seasoning." My husband is momentarily surprised, but quickly turns red with rage.
"How dare you speak to me like that?"
he shouts. Isadora, who's already there, starts to get angry as well, and both she and my husband yell,
"I want a divorce."
"Get out of this house now!" Thinking that it might be a good thing for them to kick me out, I simply nod my head as usual. While packing, my husband orders me to be ready for a shower and make the next meal more delicious. To all of this, I reply as always, "It's because I'm a bad wife," and finish packing my minimal belongings. My husband, annoyed that things didn't go his way, lets out a loud sigh and grabs a beer from the kitchen. Ignoring him, I take my bags to the front door. Isadora follows me, letting out an obvious sigh. "If you're really sorry, I might forgive you. Now go do the dishes." "No, I'm leaving because my husband told me to." Upon hearing this, Isadora goes to call my beer-drinking husband. Ignoring them both, I walk out of the house and into the waiting taxi, putting distance between myself and that home. Inside the taxi, I wonder why I'd ever listened to such people. Maybe unconsciously, I didn't want to sever family ties. Realizing that I had been enduring my husband and Isadora's unreasonable demands and verbal abuse for this reason makes me firmly decide once again that I will divorce for my own freedom. Given the toxicity I had endured through the divorce, I had already begun preparations to claim financial compensation. Along with the divorce papers, I sent an invoice. Ever since I left the house, my phone was bombarded with calls and texts from my husband and Isadora, all of which I ignored. Unreachable and furious after reviewing the divorce papers and bills, my husband decided to take legal action against me. I got a notice from the court saying that he had filed a lawsuit against me. I was shaken for a moment, but then thought, well, it figures with those people, and began preparing my case. Thanks to Eileen's advice, I had a strong case. I presented as evidence the recordings I had made of my husband's abusive language before leaving the house, as well as photos of injuries he had inflicted on me, and medical reports that backed them up. The evidence worked in my favor, and I won the case. The court ordered him to grant the divorce and pay tens of thousands in compensation. Finally, I gained a peaceful, humane life. Afterward, Eileen told me that I was oblivious to it because I was so emotionally dependent on my ex-husband, but the yelling from him and Isadora was heard by the neighbors. There were already rumors that I was perhaps being abused, or at least mistreated. My departure confirmed their suspicions, and the rumors spread like wildfire. I heard they're now seen as the family that tormented their wife. Isadora and Lewis broke up right after. It seems they stayed together while I was there because they feared it might hurt me if they separated. Isadora was apparently devastated, clinging to Lewis's feet and crying, but he firmly told her,
"I can't be with someone who doesn't value their son's wife and family. I can't imagine a future with someone who can't feel gratitude for the people close to them."
Since I left the house, my husband was forced to take care of household chores, something he was never good at. He and Isadora seemed to be constantly arguing about dividing up the tasks. He used to relieve his work stress by taking it out on me, but with me gone, he turned to alcohol for relief. During our legal proceedings, his drinking increased significantly. When he drank, he would become violent, and he became even more aggressive, now even towards Isadora. One day, he went to work still under the influence and caused some trouble. This led to disciplinary action, and he lost his job. Now he seems to be doing tough physical labor to make ends meet. Fortunately, I had received the settlement money in a lump sum, so I wasn't affected by his downfall. After giving heartfelt thank yous to Eileen and Lewis, who had helped me, I moved far away and started a new life. Even though Eileen and I now live farther apart, we continue to deepen our friendship, meeting for coffee and taking trips together. Though this was an awful experience and I didn't gain a family, I found something equally valuable: true friendship. I've returned to nursing, feeling even more fulfilled than before as I work diligently for my patients. And I've tried starting new things that I've always been interested in, like marathons and swimming. I'm enjoying my days, free and uncontrolled by anyone, filled with fun and excitement. Move your stuff out of the way, then there won't be any problems. He ordered me like that. A place for you to sleep? The hallway is empty, isn't it? My husband made an unbelievable remark. Fine. I did as he wished and slept in the hallway. Afterwards, they would deeply regret their actions. My name is Helen, a 30-year-old office worker. I've been married to Richard for 2 years. We met through work. Our respective companies were business partners, and we were both in charge of the account. Initially, someone else had been in charge, but partway through, Richard took over, and that's when we met. Richard gave the impression of being a hardworking and serious person. After working together several times, Richard invited me to dinner, and that led us to exchange contact information. From then on, we started meeting privately as well, and began dating. Richard is 2 years older than me, very understanding and reliable. He always looks cool, taking care not to make me feel uncomfortable during dates. With his gentle and grateful personality, Richard looked incredibly wonderful. We continued to date, and about 2 years later, we decided to get married. I was very happy to decide to marry the man I loved, Richard. After that, we held a family meeting, introduced our families to each other, and then had our wedding ceremony. Many people attended our wedding, making it a memorable ceremony. Seeing Dad and Mom cry, I felt happy, thinking I had done something good for my parents. After that, we went on our honeymoon and began our married life upon returning to the country. Our married life was incredibly enjoyable, and I felt happy every day. Every morning I wake up to find Richard sleeping beside me, and every night I'd greet him with a welcome home. Simply eating meals together every day made me incredibly happy. On our days off, we often watched movies on Netflix because we both love films. We're more of indoor people, so we put a lot of thought into making our home time enjoyable. We invested in a comfortable sofa and even got picky about the coffee we'd sip while watching movies. I studied various things and became proficient in brewing coffee. I also often baked treats. Richard was pleased, saying it felt like being in a cafe while at home, when I served delicious baked goods and coffee while we watched movies. In this manner, we spent our days happily as a married couple. Before I knew it, 2 years had passed, and I thought we'd continue to create many more happy memories together. However, recently, there's been a presence that has started to bother me. Patricia, my mother-in-law. Until now, we had had a good relationship with my in-laws. Richard likes his parents' home, so we often visited, and I would occasionally accompany him. Both Patricia and my father-in-law were kind at those times. However, my father-in-law recently passed away, due to an illness. After the hectic times of the funeral and other related events, Patricia started coming to our house quite frequently. "Richard has arrived."
Ah, welcome, Mom.
Patricia would often come over to visit on our days off. It appears that Richard is the one inviting her. As the eldest son, Richard always seemed to make Patricia happy with his invitations. They would have joyful conversations every time, but they often spoke about family matters, making it difficult for me to join in. Moreover, Patricia would frequently complain about various things to me.
Do you make this kind of food every day?
I feel sorry for Richard.
The room isn't well cleaned. You're failing as a wife.
Both of us are working, so we divide the household chores. Richard mainly takes care of the cleaning, and I try to make meals as simple as possible so it doesn't interfere with work. Because of that, I often freeze prepared dishes, but Patricia would randomly open our fridge and complain about what she found in the freezer.
You can make hamburgers on the same day, can't you? Serving frozen food is unthinkable. You're a housewife. You shouldn't neglect your chores.
Patricia would say things like this, even though I am also working as a company employee. She doesn't seem to understand that. Well, I am also working, so I would like some flexibility in how things are done. Even when I say that, Patricia responds,
You're busy with just a part-time job. How pathetic.
What is she misunderstanding? Patricia doesn't seem to think I'm a full-time employee. Every time I explain that I'm a company employee, she doesn't listen at all.
Women can't possibly excel as company employees, after all.
She completely disbelieves me, citing such outdated reasons. And what's troubling is that Richard seems to take Patricia's side, or rather, he can't seem to break free from his mother. So even when I talk to him about Patricia, he doesn't seem to think she's in the wrong.
Mom is a bit scatterbrained. I know saying she has old-fashioned views sounds negative, but why not just think of her as traditional?
He says things like this to me, but that's not the point. My issue is with her dismissing me based on outdated views. I couldn't care less what you call her way of thinking. However, Richard doesn't understand my feelings at all, and I had no choice but to endure the harassment. Then, Patricia began to get carried away and made an even more shocking statement.
Maybe I should move into this house.
What? This isn't a joke. Why would she even say something like that? Coming over to this house all the time is kind of tiring, so I was thinking maybe I should just live here. I absolutely do not want that to happen. But of course, Richard agreed.
That's a great idea. Let's all live together.
That's what Richard said. I talked to Richard after Patricia had left. You agreed to live with Patricia, but what are we going to do about the rooms? Our house is a 2 LDK, and we don't have any spare rooms. We were using the 2 rooms as a bedroom and a storage room for our belongings. Therefore, there's no space for Patricia to live if she comes. What on earth is Richard planning to do? Then, Richard said something unbelievable.
Just clear out your stuff. Then there won't be any problems.
He ordered me like that. What? I was surprised that Richard would suddenly say something like that, and also shocked at his attitude. Why is he suddenly so cold? Why are you speaking so harshly?
Mom said you were bullying her.
What?
You spoke insultingly about Mom, didn't you?
I had no idea what he was talking about. While it's true that Patricia had said unreasonable things to me, and I had retorted, I hadn't used any language that could be considered insulting. Probably Patricia said that to discredit me. I haven't said anything insulting.
Don't lie.
I'm not lying.
So you're saying Mom is lying?
Yes, Patricia is spouting nonsense. Hearing that, Richard's face turned bright red with anger.
Cut it out. So Mom was right. Your true nature is terrible.
Why won't you believe me?
Obviously, I believe what Mom says is correct. Anyway, clear all your stuff out. We're putting Mom's stuff in.
Mom and I will share the bedroom.
So where should I sleep then?
Where can you sleep? How about the hallway?
Richard made an unbelievable statement. Fine. I really can't believe it. How could he do such a thing? My affection for Richard cooled instantly. And when Patricia arrived, they really did clear out my stuff and put hers in. What's more, the bedroom was now being used by Richard and Patricia, leaving me without a place to sleep. I couldn't believe they would actually make me sleep in the hallway. Richard and Patricia smirked at me as I stood there, stunned. But I won't give in to such people. As they wished, I slept in the hallway, no matter what. Later, Richard and Patricia would deeply regret this. To sleep in the hallway, I bought a high-end sleeping bag so that my body wouldn't ache. Surprisingly, I could sleep more comfortably than when I was in the bedroom. This might actually work for my lifestyle. Plus, Richard's snoring often kept me awake, so maybe not being bothered by that is a good thing. While staying positive, I was set on getting my revenge on Patricia and Richard. I started keeping a daily log of the harassment I was subjected to. Patricia made it easy for me to record her, since she would loudly berate me. I documented every instance of her bullying me, making it look tough even though I was actually comfortable. About 3 months later, one day Richard brought a colleague home from work. Apparently, they decided to continue their night out by drinking at our place. Patricia took this as an opportunity to act like a good person and try to impress Richard's colleague.
Your mom seems like a kind person.
Hearing that, Richard looked quite pleased. I was busy making food and preparing drinks. They kept the party going, and eventually Richard's colleague decided to stay the night.
When I was told there was no guest room, I said I don't mind at all and would be fine with sleeping on the floor.
However, I couldn't let a guest sleep on the floor, so I suggested the sofa. The sofa is made of good material, so it shouldn't be too uncomfortable. When we offered, Richard's colleague gratefully accepted and decided to sleep on the sofa. Richard and Patricia, perhaps worn out from talking nonstop and drinking too much, looked sleepy as they headed to the bedroom. As usual, I prepared my sleeping bag in the hallway after cleaning up. I also continued my habit of recording the harassment I endured from Richard and Patricia. Just then, Richard's colleague opened the living room door to use the bathroom and was surprised to find me in the hallway.
Whoa, you startled me. What are you doing here?
I had forgotten to move because sleeping in the hallway had become such a routine for me. But at this time, I saw this as an opportunity. I've been told to always sleep in the hallway.
What?
Richard's colleague seemed sober now and was listening intently to what I had to say.
Is he really making you do this?
Yes, he told me there are too few rooms, so Patricia's stuff goes inside and mine goes out. I was even locked out of the bedroom I used to share, so now Patricia sleeps there instead.
Wow, that's messed up.
His expression showed clear disgust after hearing my story. He then seemed curious about what I was writing.
What are you writing there?
This is a daily record of the harassment I endure. Having something like this can be advantageous in case of a divorce.
I see. May I take a look?
Yes, of course. I showed him the journal where I recorded the daily harassment. He skimmed through the contents, then returned the journal to me with a sigh.
Richard's mother is quite terrible too, isn't she? To be honest, I never thought he'd be such a lowlife. You should leave him as soon as possible. I know some lawyers, so if you'd like, I can help.
Thank you. This was a lucky break. He had essentially witnessed Richard and Patricia harassing me. This meant I now had someone who could vouch for the fact that I was being subjected to this treatment. This would undoubtedly work in my favor during the divorce proceedings. He then gave me his business card for work, mentioning that I could email him if I needed a lawyer's recommendation.
The fact that he chose to give me a business card instead of directly exchanging WhatsApp information showed that he was considerate and professional. He mentioned he's in sales, and I got the impression he's very competent at his job. Richard's colleague left early the next morning. Patricia and Richard cheerfully offered him breakfast, but he declined with a strained expression. Well, if he knew their true nature, he'd probably find them quite distasteful. After he left, Patricia and Richard started complaining that my hospitality was lacking.
You should have prepared breakfast in advance.
If people see you preparing it only now, they will politely decline and leave.
While they accused me, the truth was that his colleague seemed eager to leave early, which is why I didn't bother preparing breakfast. I was already at my limit with their baseless accusations. I immediately sent messages to the colleague asking for a lawyer recommendation. When I showed the lawyer my harassment journal, they told me that not only could I divorce Richard on the grounds of his behavior, but I could also claim compensation for the emotional distress they had caused. I went to the office to get the divorce application form, and upon returning home, thrust it in front of Richard.
I can't tolerate this life anymore. Let's divorce.
Upon hearing this, Richard looked shocked. However, Patricia seemed extremely pleased.
Isn't it great? You can get rid of unpleasant people. I always thought Richard deserved better. He should remarry a young woman at work and have kids soon.
Patricia said that, and Richard also seemed keen to divorce me.
That's absolutely true. I've decided to break up with you, haha.
Saying this, Richard filled out the divorce papers. Then I'll go submit these now, and then I'll pack my things and leave. Hearing that, both of them looked extremely pleased.
Let's go celebrate today. How about we order some top-grade sushi?
Ignoring their jubilant chatter, I left the house to submit the divorce papers to the office. Finally, I would be free from that house. Submitting the divorce papers lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. Then I returned home and packed my belongings.
Guess we won't be seeing each other anymore.
Don't come crying to us when you're single and struggling.
Both of them said that in a condescending manner. Standing at the doorway, I retorted to Richard and Patricia. As if I would ever rely on a spineless mama's boy and his foolish parents.
What did you just say?
How dare you say that?
Patricia and Richard blushed with embarrassment at my harsh words. I'm just telling it like it is. I won't forgive the constant torment and bullying you've put me through. I've already hired a lawyer. So I will sue you for the emotional distress you've caused me with your words and actions. Upon hearing this, both looked extremely flustered.
Wait, are you serious about suing?
We haven't done anything that bad, have we?
If you lack awareness, all the more reason for you to experience the consequences. In any case, I'll be sending a certified letter, so you can check the details there. Both of them went silent, their faces pale. In my heart, I yelled, "It worked!" and felt a surge of joy throughout. Even now, remembering the troubled faces of Richard and Patricia makes me smile. Afterwards, I went through my lawyer to claim compensation from Richard for causing me emotional distress through his words and actions. With ample evidence available, he had no choice but to pay. Moreover, that colleague of his spread word of Richard's unacceptable behavior within the company. Now Richard is looked at with cold eyes by his coworkers. He's whispered about behind his back, referred to as a pathetic man who hurts others with his terrible words and actions, and he's reportedly feeling quite uncomfortable. However, with the payment of the compensation due in the divorce proceedings, and having to cover living expenses and rent for Patricia as well, Richard must be in quite a tough situation now, especially considering his salary isn't that high to begin with, and his career prospects have dimmed. But it's all Richard's own fault, and I really think he got what he deserved. On the other hand, I've started living in a single-bedroom condominium near my workplace, and am enjoying very comfortable days. Being close to the office allows me to work overtime until the last minute, and I'm able to achieve good results in my job. For now, I plan to focus on my career, aiming for advancement while living a work-centered life.
Starting today, this is our place. Strangers can scram.
Whoa, hold on a minute. What's going on with both of you?
After my mother's funeral had just ended, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law began to insult me non-stop. My husband intervened, but the two of them showed no signs of slowing down. You're being tricked. Maybe you've been brainwashed or something? Haha. That's right. It's all because your mom spoiled you. She's the one who raised you to be this way. Your mom's to blame. When my sister-in-law and mother-in-law badmouthed my mother, my anger exploded. I can tolerate them speaking ill of me, but I absolutely will not tolerate them speaking ill of my deceased mother. My name is Kathy, 35 years old. I met my husband David, who is a year older than me, at work, and we got married 5 years ago. I used to live with my mother and husband. Reflecting back, a lot has happened in these past 5 years. 5 years ago, I was working at the real estate company my father owned. I've always been interested in the flow of people and money, so I studied economics in college and applied that knowledge to my work. However, there were those who saw my success as a result of my own ability, and those who thought it was due to my parents' influence. For example, when I heard people talking about me, they often referred to me as the boss's daughter, rather than by my name. Moreover, my husband was the top salesperson in the same company. It seems that he was popular with many women, and I received nasty glances from various people. Of course, I don't think that all of my work success is due to my own efforts. I believe it's all thanks to the cooperation of those around me. But I couldn't help but feel frustrated at being labeled as the boss's daughter. While I was living these frustrating days, my father passed away. My brother took over as president, and the harsh stares towards me became even more severe. You must have screwed up. That's why your brother's now the president. Now we'll have to call you the president's sister, right? Haha. Normally, I might just feel frustrated, but at that time, I had just lost my real father. Those words were hard to take for me, who was mentally worn out. After my father's funeral, a single thought crossed my mind. What do I really want to do? Even if I tried to keep going in this situation, something inspirational was missing. As I thought about it, I found myself saying, I want to be an investor in front of my husband. David, rather than rejecting my outrageous proposal, supported me. When I told my mom that I wanted to quit my job and become an investor, she laughed and said, You didn't have to worry about your father. You should have done what you loved from the start. Despite my father's recent death, this might seem outrageous. Before talking to my mother, I was always thinking about the negatives. But looking at my mother's smile, I began to feel that the opinions of others didn't matter. While dealing with the funeral, settling the estate, moving, and other busy tasks, I started as an investor. Of course, not everything went smoothly from the beginning, but my calm and cheerful husband and mother encouraged me every step of the way. Thanks to both of them, the investments I started with my savings and my father's inheritance went well. After a few years, my income had significantly increased compared to when I was working at the company. On the one hand, I was living a fulfilling life, but on the other hand, there were two people who were a big concern: my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is 3 years older than my husband, 4 years older than me, and she's still unmarried. From the time that David and I decided to get married, I got the feeling she wasn't particularly pleased. Even my mother-in-law seemed to think that I was just a rich little daddy's girl, despite the fact that I was working at the same level as any other employee, even though my father was the CEO. Every time I went to my in-laws, she'd make snide comments when my husband or father-in-law weren't around. Being a pampered princess, I bet you can't do housework worth a dime. It's a woman's job to do the chores. Please don't make David do it. Mother-in-law, my own mother taught me a lot, so I can handle things on my own. But since I'm also working, David and I help each other out. It was his idea, actually. But there was no way my mother-in-law would accept that. Even my sister-in-law was often aggravated in my presence, saying things like, "It's absurd that a woman who makes her husband do housework can get married." My relationship with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law only got worse when my father-in-law passed away. It must be nice, huh? Living off David's money and slacking off at home? I have to put up with so much because my husband's gone. Why is it that you get to live so freely, Kathy? Mother-in-law, as I've told you before, I make a living as an investor. I'm not slacking off at all. In fact, I have less free time than when I was working a regular job. If you're really making a living, at least give me an allowance. You can't even have kids. You're really a good-for-nothing wife. With the death of my father-in-law, my mother-in-law became more fixated on money. She seemed to resent the fact that I, whom she considered a shut-in, didn't seem to be in financial distress, despite the fact that I had become less active outside the home as I continued my work as an investor. But that didn't mean I was thinking of giving my mother-in-law money. She claimed to be putting up with a lot, but every time I went to the in-laws, there were more and more luxury items. It was clear where the money would go if I gave it to her. I loved David, who didn't doubt people and didn't do anything to be doubted himself, so I had decided not to tell him about my in-laws. There was one time, however, that I confided in my own mother. Why can't I have children? The uncertainty looming as I approached 35 and the constant questions from my mother-in-law about, "When will you have a baby?" got to me. Her words calling me good for nothing wouldn't leave my mind, and I ended up letting it out. But my mother just looked puzzled at my outburst. "Well, I had you when I was 35, so it's okay. God will give us the right timing, I'm sure." Her words lightened my heart. Since then, even when my mother-in-law mentioned children, I was able to reassure myself children are a gift. Now, after these tumultuous 5 years, things are finally starting to calm down. Then, suddenly, my mother passed away. She had a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Losing my mother, who has always been my beacon of light, plunged me into grief. David, who had lived with me for several years, seemed to be taking it pretty hard too, though he was kind and supportive. The funeral took place before we had fully come to terms with my mother's absence. Many people came to the funeral of my mother, who had worked as an executive at the company my brother took charge of, even after my father passed away. Among them were my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. It seemed they had timed it for when David was away from his seat. "There's no need for condolences, right?" Without even offering condolences, they started signing the register. I was simply dumbfounded at the insensitivity of my in-laws. And yet, when David returned, my in-laws changed their demeanor in an instant. "You may be going through a tough time, but Kathy's shock is probably greater. You should support her," they would say, as if they were considering my feelings. Later, when I was deeply feeling the exhaustion from the past busy few days, the doorbell rang at home. My husband, considerate as he is, answered the door to find my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Due to David's kind nature, he thought they must have come to cheer me up. David invited the two in without any hesitation. As my mother-in-law and sister-in-law entered the living room, they glanced at me and drew an unpleasant curve on their mouths. And then they uttered words beyond my expectation. "From today, this is our home. Outsiders should leave." Mom?" David exclaimed in surprise. But my mother-in-law didn't stop talking. "Until now, we've put up with you because your mom was here. But now, only unemployed Kathy is left. If you are parasitized by such a woman, you will be ruined. We'll live together with you, so you should divorce Kathy."
What are you saying, Mom? At a time like this? And what do you mean by unemployed?
I've told you many times that Kathy is an investor. When you say investor, it sounds like she has a proper job. But essentially, isn't she just playing around, buying and selling stocks? I wonder how such a woman can be a wife. You can find a much better wife.
Hold on a minute. What do you mean by bad-mouthing Kathy? What do you two intend to say? Kathy earns her own money. Don't call it playing around.
You're being fooled. You've been together with Kathy's mother all the time. Haven't you been brainwashed? Haha. That's right. Kathy has become like this because her mom spoiled her. I understand why David wants to defend Kathy. After all, it's her mom's fault for raising Kathy like this. When my sister-in-law and mother-in-law badmouthed my mom, my anger, which had been lethargic until a moment ago, exploded. I can bear with them badmouthing me, but I will never tolerate them badmouthing my mom. Stop speaking ill of my deceased mother. I expressed my anger to its full extent and glared at my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. However, both of them were grinning, showing no signs of fear. Okay, I get it. You don't like us speaking ill of your mom, huh? Haha. Now that the mom who has always sided with you and let you be a shut-in is gone, it must be hard for you to hear the truth. I looked down to see my clenched fist trembling. In order to suppress my own outburst, I took a deep breath. And just as I was about to retort, David, not me, was the one who spoke first.
Enough is enough, Mom. Don't speak ill of Kathy or my mother-in-law. Kathy is not a shut-in. She's a bona fide investor. My mother-in-law and I have been cheering for Kathy's efforts all along. If Kathy was just playing around, neither my mother-in-law nor I would have allowed it.
Even my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and certainly I, couldn't hide our surprise at the usually calm David's low voice. As for my mother-in-law, she seemed unable to digest the situation and began to hastily make excuses. Don't be so angry. Even so, the life Kathy led so far was possible because of your earnings, right? Didn't you let her live a privileged life to the point of buying such a high-rise condo? Poor David. If you live with us, we'll do all the housework. Just give us a small allowance, that's all we need. The rest is...
Don't you know, Mom?
David interrupted my mother-in-law's words, speaking in a flustered voice.
This apartment is Kathy's.
What? At David's words, my mother-in-law let out an absurd cry. Unable to hide her surprise, she started to fact-check with her eyes wide open. This apartment is Kathy's? Didn't you buy it?
When did I ever say that? This apartment is a legacy from my father-in-law, and Kathy got it. That's why the title, of course, is Kathy's. Plus, we split the living expenses evenly. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but Kathy earns more than I do.
What? Not only my mother-in-law, but even my sister-in-law were surprised by David's confession. No wonder. They couldn't have imagined that I was earning more than David. My mother-in-law lost her momentum at David's words and became like a corpse. Taking over for my defeated mother-in-law, my sister-in-law opened her mouth. That can't be. Investors make that much. Making more money than working for a company just by buying and selling as an individual?
I don't know about other investors. It might just be that Kathy has a good sense for it. But facts are facts. And yet, how dare you belittle my precious wife? This is our home? Don't kid me. Both of you, get out now.
At David's words, my sister-in-law began to panic. What? Wait a minute. We sold our house thinking we could live here from today. What? Now it was my turn, along with my husband, to let out a cry of surprise.
You sold our house? Why all of a sudden? At least you could have consulted with me.
We thought we could live here. Besides, we didn't have money. I quit my job thinking you would support me. So if you don't let us live here, we'll be in trouble. Hey, Mom, say something. While looking at David with pleading eyes, my sister-in-law shook her mother, who had become like a corpse. However, perhaps the shock was too great, and my mother-in-law was in a daze. My sister-in-law, who had lost her confidence, clung to me this time. Hey, Kathy, I'm sorry. I apologize. Please persuade David for me. We can't survive like this. You said you sold your house, which means you have a considerable amount of money at hand, don't you? To the clinging sister-in-law, I said coldly. At that, the sister-in-law began to flip out at me. Don't get smart. Don't talk back. Just because your investments went well, don't get carried away.
Enough is enough.
David raised his voice, which echoed far more than the sister-in-law's scream. Towards the sister-in-law, who closed her mouth at that voice, David directed a sharp gaze.
Forget about the house. I won't even ask for my share, so just get out of here right now.
Saying that, my husband practically forced his mother and sister out of the house and locked the door. For a while, we could hear the sound of the doorbell and the pounding on the door, but after a while, it became quiet. After that, according to relatives, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law seemed to have rented a cheap apartment and started living together. My in-laws' house, which was situated in a remote area, couldn't be sold for a high price, and the land was cheap too. My sister-in-law couldn't manage to get a decent job, and their money quickly ran out. Still not learning their lesson, they had tried to rely on me and David several times, but of course, we turned them away at the door. They had sold all the branded goods they owned, and now I hear they are barely making ends meet by working part-time jobs from morning till night. Meanwhile, I've been able to live freely as an investor without anyone around to make nasty comments. And next year, we're planning to add one more member to our family, just as my mother had said. I was thankful to her once again for being blessed at just the right time.